These days, cataracts are relatively easy to fix, but the British surgeon who invented the procedure back in the 1950s found it hard to convince colleagues it was safe.
Dr. Mark Porter explains how they came to see the error of their ways.
Cataracts affect hundreds of thousands of Brits each year. Blurred vision, faded colours and dazzling glare from bright lights are a few of the symptoms. If left untreated, your sight gets progressively worse and you can even go blind.
But these days, it's an easy condition to fix, and it's all down to a maverick British eye surgeon called Harold Ridley. In the 1950s, he pioneered a new way of treating cataracts that's transformed the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world.
To understand cataracts, we have to look deep inside the eye. Just behind our coloured iris is the lens, which sits here at the front of the eye and focuses light on the retina at the back.
Now, the lens is mostly made up of protein and water, and it's changes in that protein that makes it milky or opaque, and that's the cataract. It's a bit like looking through frosted glass.
In the UK, the vast majority of cataracts are down to ageing, but other causes include diabetes, eye injuries and exposure to ultraviolet light. So a cataract is a clouding of the lens which can't be reversed. To solve the problem, you have to remove the lens through a hole in the eye. But without lenses, our eyes can't focus. This was the challenge that Ridley took on.
Up until the 1950s, these were the only solution: thick magnifying glasses. Now, not only did they not look very attractive, you still got blurred vision and a lot of distortion.
Ridley was convinced there must be a better way of helping restore people's sight. Inspiration struck from a surprising source: the Spitfire plane. During World War II, Harold had operated on injured Spitfire pilots and noticed something unusual.
Slivers of this stuff, tough acrylic plastic, were stuck in the eyes of Spitfire pilots. Now, they were getting there when their canopies splintered under gunfire. Normally, the immune system rejects any foreign bodies in the eye and causes a severe reaction, but not in this case. Harold realised he was onto something.
He teamed up with the optical scientist John Pike, and together they developed an artificial lens made up of the plastic. They called it the intraocular lens.
The men kept quiet about their invention, though. Doctors at the time were strongly opposed to inserting anything into the eye. Harold was flying in the face of medical opinion and putting both his career and reputation at risk.
Here at St Thomas's Hospital in London in 1950, he carried out the first ever lens operation in great secrecy. Professor David Spelton is a consultant ophthalmologist at the hospital. He worked with Harold in the mid-70s.
This is the old operating theatre book for 1949 and 50, and you see Ridley did an operation which he called a lenticular graft. It's a rather strange term, but this was the first intraocular lens implant, so they didn't really have a name for it.
We've got some old instruments here, the sort Ridley might have used himself, very different from the ones used today.
Yes, he had to use an instrument like this, which was called a Graphie knife, and they used this to make the incision in the eye, and that really meant opening up half the eye to get the lens out.
Of course, that incision can be smaller today because of the modern lens.
Yes, the first lens that Ridley used was large and rigid and wouldn't fold. This is the sort of lens that we use these days, and this is made out of a special plastic which you can fold, so you can inject it down a tube into the eye without enlarging the incision.
Although it was a brilliant concept, these early operations were not without their problems. Harold managed to successfully implant the lenses, but they'd often slip out of place. When word got out about the operations, Harold was criticised by his fellow eye surgeons, who believed he was putting his patients at risk.
But Harold's more supportive colleagues persevered, and by the 1980s, the tide had turned.
Today, Harold Ridley's procedure is the most common surgical operation done in the Western world. In fact, Harold even had the surgery himself when he reached his 80s, proudly claiming he was the only man to have invented his own operation. Harold's vision for vision really was a medical breakthrough.